Get ready for a no BS approach to health and fitness. This is NBS Fitness Radio.
Welcome back to NBS Fitness Radio. I am here with Brandon Reilly. Brandon is a trainer at NBS. Say hi, bud.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
All right, very cool. So Brandon just completed something really cool. It's called the Sylamore 25K. So why don't you kind of introduce what that is, your history with it, and kind of talk about that experience some.
Cool. So Sylamore is a trail race that's put on every February. About 200, over 200 people typically do the 25K, which is 15 and a half miles. The race takes place in Mountain Home, Arkansas, which is kind of northern central Arkansas. So you're hitting some of the Ozarks. There's about 2,500 feet of elevation gain, and it's some pretty rocky terrain. The race is a lot of fun. If you're not at your computer at 1 o'clock the day that registration opens, you're not likely to get into the race. It sells out within like 3 to 5 minutes.
How many total people compete in it?
Well,
with the whole thing, because there's a 20. Go through all the different options there are.
So there's the 25K and then the 50K.
Okay.
The 25K you run out roughly 8 miles and then 8 miles back. The 50K folks take double the distance. So they run 25 kilometers out and then 25K back. So they go further up into the mountains, have a lot more elevation gain, and are grinding through it for a lot longer.
So there's the 25K and the 50K.
Yes.
And then you said about 200 people do the 25.
Roughly, sometimes over 300. I think one year I was registered as one of like 350 people.
For the 25?
For the 25K alone.
Oh, dang, okay.
So not near as many people do the 50K.
Yeah.
I think this year the 50K had 200 people signed up, but due to the horrific weather, only 90 people ran. So it was a challenge in itself just to get out there.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously being in February, you're not gonna have the best weather. It's gonna be cold, potentially wet. But this February was even worse.
Gnarly.
So talk about kind of like the experience of the day.
So the week leading into the race, all that bad weather was coming in to Memphis, and it was even worse in Arkansas. So it was kind of dicey, just wondering how the heck I was going to get out there the day before and all that. The trail conditions were honestly not the worst I've seen. The first year I did it back in 2015 was the worst. It was significant patches of ice on the trail. This year, it was so well managed. I mean, they have a great team of people who get out there and work on the trail in the weeks leading up to it. So there was like some salt put down on sections of the trail. And that second wave of the weather had not hit yet.
Gotcha, yeah. And they got in the teens yet?
Not yet. That was for race day.
Okay, so a race. So yeah, okay. So you made it out there, and then what was race day like? So
for the first time they did a wave start. Normally everybody starts at the exact same time. There's a bottleneck at certain sections in the first mile or two, and then it kind of levels out. Yeah. This year they did a wave start, which was awesome. Not only because of COVID, just to get some distance between people, but because of the weather, we didn't want a big bottleneck at the creek. So wave start, I went in the second wave, and you really didn't run into as many issues of having to pass people or get past. So trail conditions were really great considering the weather.
And so kind of what's some of the different terrain that you come across? You said a creek, so you're like a full immersion crossing a creek, or like up to your shins?
It changes every year.
Okay.
So that's the allure of Sylamore, is you really don't know what you're going to get because of the weather and the time of year that it's at. I've ran it in 20 degree weather. I've run it in 70 degree weather. So we start the race. You're running up a highway, and then you turn right and go down a very steep gravel road, and that's where the trail officially begins. Is about a mile in.
Okay.
So, and that's where the creek crossing is. And
So with the first mile, almost you're having to cross a
exactly
creek.
right at on mile 1, you'll cross the creek, and everybody's always kind of sketched out by it. Some people are dreading it. I'm looking forward to it. It feels good. I'm ready to roll.
How big? What's the width of the creek?
This year, the width maybe 15 to 20 meters.
Okay.
And it was up to mid-thigh this year, so right at the pockets.
How's that compared to other years?
It was on the high side,
Okay.
kind of. One year it was literally not even up to the shins. You could just run right through. Most of the time it's about knee level, and you have to wade across. You can't really get through it quickly. You just have to watch your step and wade your way across.
What's the floor bed like? Is it rocky?
It's rocky.
Fat rocks?
Yes.
Like slippery fat rocks?
Very slippery fat rocks. There's generally many people. That's a big watch spot. A lot of people come to watch, cheer people on their way out and on their way back. So you kind of have people up on a hilly section saying, hey, stay left. It's a little shallower over here, or watch out for this rock type of thing.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you make it past the creek, what kind of other obstacles did you encounter?
You're basically running along rock facings, and then just little switchbacks around the mountain. If you saw the picture I posted earlier in the week, there's just icicles hanging from those rock facings that are like 6 feet tall. And so it's got some amazing scenery. I'd say the rock facings, you get pretty close to them. You have to really watch your step, or you might eat some concrete.
Okay, wow.
So, I mean, you're never like having to like scale the wall or anything like that. But, if you're dodging a rock and looking down,
you may run into another bigger rock.
Exactly. So it's definitely rocky. Then you'll run into some patches that are just kind of flat, nice gravel. And then you're right back into up, down, up, down. I'd say once you get past that first 5 miles, then the hills really start.
Okay. So how many times have you done this?
This was number 4.
Okay, number 4.
Mm-hmm.
What was your pacing like throughout this one?
This one, unfortunately, was slower than I would have liked. I went into the race with a bit of a calf injury and just didn't have enough weeks to fully heal it. So I knew I was going to have to adjust my pace from the get-go. And then when you factor in the cold and everything, it was a much slower pace than I anticipated going into it.
Yeah.
But I was keeping roughly a 12 to 13-minute mile, depending on the elevation.
Okay.
And then on the flat sections, if I saw my pace getting under a 10-minute mile, I knew, like, okay, back down a little bit.
Yeah.
You won't be able to maintain this when it starts getting hilly. So
when you're doing a race like that, are you trying to just maintain like somewhat consistent pace, or are you kind of saying you're doing a little bit of a walk run strategy? I feel good right here. I'm gonna kind of catch up, run a little bit faster here, knowing that this other obstacle is coming up that I'm gonna have to kind of walk through a little bit.
Yeah. I'd say I kept a mostly consistent pace the entire race, but I'm going to haul ass on the downhill. The downhill is kind of where you can make up some time, let gravity do some more work for you, and give your legs a little bit of a rest.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was really a steady pace.
Okay. Very cool.
I don't like to do intervals on a long run where I'm like running fast for a certain time or distance and then back it down. I like to just stay moving. At ideally, about an 80% intensity, for that kind of distance and terrain, it may be back down to about 70%, but just keep one foot in front of the other and try not to walk. That's the goal.
Because if you walk, it's just hard to get going
it's so
again.
hard. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to walk on some of the uphills,
Yeah.
but ideally you just keep that same cadence.
Okay. So how does training for a trail race like that compare to training for like a regular road race? Because you're talking 16 miles there, and a lot of times, for half marathons, they've got like the couch to half kind of program, which is basically just adding an extra mile every week, right? So how does training for that Sylamore race look?
So you got to respect the distance. There's just really no way to get around putting that amount of distance in the mountains, especially if you live around here. We don't have that kind of terrain to just go practice on any given time. So strength work is a huge priority. I'll do at least 3 days a week, typically more like 4 of strength work. Heavily involved with single leg work. Anything to strengthen your core and posture is going to help a ton with running.
So on those strength days, are you doing like a full body each day, or are you doing like an upper lower? Or
it's a little upper lower.
Okay.
Like one day may be more of a squat and upper body pull.
Okay.
Another day may be more of like your deadlifting and then upper body push. So it's I balanced it out very well. One day may just be a complete leg smoker.
You gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And then so you got 3 or 4 strength days. What are you doing for like your trail time, your running time?
So an interval run, short distance interval, maybe accumulate several 200 to 400 meter runs. I did as much of my training as possible on trail.
Okay. Shelby Farms.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, if I was looking to get a little bit more speed and knew that I was aiming for consistent times, then I would do it on the exact same patch of trail. Or if I was doing it on the concrete, I would do it in the cove, just because we know the meter marks there. Another day of training would be a little bit on the medium duration side. Kind of we call it active recovery session, where you're just flowing through a set of movements for 30 minutes. And then on the weekend, long run.
Okay. And what was the longest run you did building up to that?
Only made it to a 10-mile run. Planned to make it to 12.
Is that and that's a 10 straight? It's
yes.
not a 5 and a 5. It's a 10. Okay.
Right. Now I did a few weeks prior to that do. It ended up being 3 5Ks with like a 2 or 3 hours in between them. But that was only one particular training day. The longer runs were usually just one straight shot.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. So how many weeks did you prep? Like when how many weeks out did you say, okay, here's my beginning day for the Sylamore training?
Typically, it's November 1st, the day of registration. So you're looking at about 4 months.
Okay, so like 16 weeks, 15, 16 weeks. Okay.
Right. This year, I got started maybe a few weeks prior.
Okay.
Because it had been a couple of years since I had done this race, and I've had the calf flare up a couple of times. So I knew that I needed to respect the distance and accumulate some miles a little bit sooner.
Very cool. What I want to talk about recovery. So first, let's kind of talk about the calf, kind of what the underlying injury was, and then what you did to try to prevent it from flaring up as best you could, and then what happened when it did flare up. How did you address it?
Let's see. So the history of the calf, I believe, and I've gone to a couple of really awesome PTs, one of them being Clay Jones at 901 PT. And we've kind of discovered that I jumped straight from being not a runner at all to loving 25Ks.
Yeah.
And so my endurance, I feel like, kind of exceeded my calf's structural ability to take on the distance. You can have an awesome 1 mile time or 5K time and be able to hold your 5K pace for even longer. But at a certain point, when you go out there and your long runs are 8+ miles and you're only used to running 3, that accumulation catches up a ton.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. Another was that when I discovered CrossFit, I really, prior to that, had only been mostly doing upper body.
Yeah.
And then you add in all the squats, which are amazing, obviously, but you add in the volume of box jumps, double unders, and running. And eventually, if you don't have the strength, if you're not doing some solid calf raises and things to isolate those calf muscles, they can atrophy and not be able to maintain that load.
Yeah. So what was the first calf injury? A pull? Like a gnarly pull that knotted up pretty good?
It's actually the strangest thing. I think the most vivid one that comes to mind is I was kicking up into a handstand push-up against the wall, and I actually heard a pop.
Okay.
So just that quick movement, kicking into the wall and just overstretching at the ankle, and boom. And I thought, whoa, that's not good. And it was while I was gearing up for training for the run that year.
Okay. And how many years ago was that?
That was probably before the first one. So 4 years ago.
Okay.
All right. It was before my second 25K.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
remember that. Yeah.
Okay. So then when it would flare up, like what would you do?
Lots. First off, the show must go on. Lots of assault biking.
Okay.
You can't really just, my legs hurt, I can't run. Or, you gotta adapt. So a lot of biking, a lot of rowing, a lot of burpees. I kind of would look at my training for the day and see what the distance involved was and plug in one of those other variables.
You're just trying to kind of get the overall body endurance built up.
Yes.
And if you can get have some lower body movement in there as well.
Definitely.
Very cool. Okay. Cool. So one thing that you really believe in and have been focused on lately is breathing. So kind of give kind of like a bird's eye view of like what that is, what it encompasses, and then like how you feel it benefits you.
So breathing, we take thousands of breaths every single day. Most of us don't even really think about it. But it's a tool that we can use to either upregulate us, downregulate us, get us into a more relaxed state of mind, or even kind of prime the pump before you work out or before you have to perform. There's so many different protocols that can be used, such as in between sets while you're working out, for rest, for meditation, and definitely while you're in the middle of an effort.
So go through some of those protocols that you've used and kind of talk about the changes that you felt in your own performance through them.
So one that I use all the time is a system called Gears.
Okay.
And this is just a great way of ramping you up intelligently. I like to use the analogy of, you wouldn't start your car up and go 0 to 60 down the cove. You're going to go in gear 1, then 2, then 3 before you hit the highway, right? So gear 1 is simply just nasal breathing, in and out through the nose only. You're going to get a lot of breaths, or very few breaths per minute, so it can lower your respiratory rate. And then after that, you'll kind of go in through the nose, out through the mouth. We can ramp that up if needed, if you're in the middle of an effort. And the goal is really just to get people in the lower gears for as long as possible. One way you can significantly improve your endurance is just to try to nasal breathe through your warm-ups.
Yeah.
Just start with your warm-up only, and if you get to where you're having to inhale through your mouth, you're going a little hard.
Yeah.
And it may feel very limited for those first couple of weeks, but then with practice, you go back to doing a more traditional breathing pattern, and your endurance has just increased significantly. Another one, and you've used this one yourself, is the kind of intro workout breathing. So like a 5-7-9 protocol, where when you're really huffing and puffing, when you finish a set, you may need to take 5 deep breaths in through your mouth, out through your mouth, and really just move that air, get that carbon dioxide out.
Yeah.
And then we can begin to slow it down with 7 breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then once you've slowed it down enough, you can.
Yeah. Still the same idea, like shifting gears. You're just kind of setting a rep scheme to it and kind of like letting those RPMs come down as you shift those gears down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think the biggest or several benefits that I've seen from kind of like being aware of breathing and focusing in on it is, one, in the middle of workouts, like using it as a set rest. So instead of just, if you're doing like, especially a CrossFit workout that's pushing you, instead of, putting a bar down or taking a little break and just having no goal during that break, instead say, I'm going to give myself 3 breaths and then I'm going to get back at it. And it's a bit of a timing benefit there, and keeps you from staying out too long. But it also gives you a goal during that break, which is to recover.
Right.
Recover as best you can and get back into it. And then for like one thing I've done with my athletes is really try to make them focus on breathing in between bouts of high output. Mm-hmm. Because especially like for football players, if they're in a 2-minute drill and they're going all out, a lot of times in those 30 seconds in between, they're hands on their hips, they're just sitting there kind of sucking wind, and it can be a mental, it can be mentally downgrading, because you're sitting there just like thinking about how tired you are, versus saying, hey, during this period, take control, recover. And it's crazy that in the 30 minutes, the difference between just sitting there and breathing sporadically versus having a focused breath protocol, the difference it can make is like night and day.
Definitely.
They feel recovered, but even more so than that, like it builds a level of confidence, and they can get themselves back into a mental state where they can actually process what's going on.
Absolutely.
So if you're just sitting there thinking about how tired you are, you can't think about the play that was just called, or what the defense is doing, what the offense is doing, or what's kind of going on around you. You're just thinking about how tired you are.
Right. That's
been a huge benefit I've seen, like personally, and then also with some of my clients with like putting in breathing.
Yeah. I love watching that shift, when somebody is huffing and puffing, and then I say, all right, hey, let's get your heart rate down. Take 5 deep breaths in and out your mouth. And then by the time they get to that in through the nose, out through the mouth, you've already seen a difference on their face and their breathing patterns. And they're like, okay, all right, this stuff has validity to it.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel better now.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of apply some of that breathing to your training for Sylamore, and then also on the day of the race?
Yeah. So deeply tied in. So as far as preparing for the race, a lot of my runs, I would say, okay, I'm gonna go. I'd be maybe a set distance and not allow yourself to go over gear 3, which is
in
So
the
if I
nose,
ever-
out the mouth.
Right. And
Yeah.
if I ever felt myself having to breathe any deeper than that, then I could back it down a little bit. On race day, I let myself go into a further gear because of the elevation.
Yeah.
But really, I tried to not get any past that little double inhale.
Little power breath.
Yeah, that double inhale makes a huge difference because you can just get a little bit more air in, and when it's cold outside, it's hard to take one deep inhale.
Yeah.
Yeah, without getting all snotty.
Right.
So,
What did you ever kind of pay attention to like heart rate? So I mean, it's just, when you're sitting there trying to decide like what my gear is, are you using a heart rate monitor and using the breath, or did you just kind of like do away with the heart rate monitor and say, I'm just gonna go full bore breath here?
yeah, really just full bore breath.
Okay.
Because I knew that the elevation would jack my heart rate up.
Yeah.
Significantly. So I just would use the terrain for kind of that built-in rest.
Okay.
You know, if there was a steep hill, I'm gonna, walk it mostly,
Yeah.
and then run when it's flat. Really run when it's downhill, and then use the breath in between that.
Very cool. What are some practical takeaways that the people listening to this podcast can have? Like, what would you tell them as far as breathing? Like, what's a protocol that they can start implementing tomorrow?
There's one you can do while listening to this. It's called box breathing. And just picture a box, and at the top you have a breath hold, and on the sides of the box you have an inhale and an exhale. So we can start with our inhale for, let's just call it 3 seconds. Inhale for 3.
Hold for 3. Exhale for 3. And then hold for another 3. Yeah. And you're just trying to kind of build that box up, like 3, 4, 5, 6.
Exactly. Yeah.
So for me, when I do box breathing, I get to a point where after the exhale, the hold's the hardest part. So
Yes.
like I can always do I can expand the inhale, expand the hold of the inhale, slow down the exhale. It's that hold after the exhale that to me is always the one I'm like, I want to take a breath. you know?
Right.
What is that the same for you, or do you find that the same with other people, or
Oh, yeah.
do other people have different areas that are more difficult?
Oh, that one's generally common. The hold on the inhale or the exhale.
Okay.
Because if you take a big old breath into your chest, it's
In that tense position.
right.
Yeah.
But if you breathe it into your belly, it's easier to hold it. The exhale, you got to think about deflating a balloon.
Yeah.
If you just then
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to hold. But if you
take it slow.
then it's easier to maintain that pressure in your diaphragm and maintain the hold.
And what about the hold after the exhale? You've exhaled all the air out of your lungs. Like, what about that one?
Oh, that one, yeah, that one's a grind.
That's the hard one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's you got to improve your CO2 tolerance.
Yeah.
And there's a test that can be done on that where you take like 20 deep full breaths and then exhale all your air and see how long you can hold it.
Gotcha.
It's a great test to do maybe once a week just to see if you're mentally able to hold that exhale a little bit longer or blow your air out for a longer period of time.
Okay.
And even if it's just a 1 second improvement each week, that's great.
Yeah. Well, during that hold, 1 second seems like an eternity.
Absolutely.
Okay. So box breathing, where you're kind of building up that box, going from 3 seconds to 4 seconds to 5, and just kind of taking it to whatever you can take it to.
I mean, I don't think there's really
not infinity, but
yeah. I mean, I don't think you need longer than 10 second box, 10-second box.
Yeah. And then how many repetitions of the box would you kind of suggest someone doing? And what is that good for?
So it could be used as a kind of a form of meditation or something that you do before an important meeting just to let your mind get more present and focused. So setting a timer for 3 to 5 minutes is plenty. And I mean, it'd be very effective to do a 20-minute meditation session or some breath work. You can do it in the sauna. I like to get in the sauna and do, 20 minutes of either box breathing or cadence breathing. Cadence breathing is simply whatever your inhale is, double the exhale. So 3-second inhale, 6-second exhale.
Okay. So a great way to kind of put your body back into like a parasympathetic state, relax, be a little bit more present if you're dealing with anxiety or just stress in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Kind of like relax yourself back down, take control of your breathing. And the box breathing protocol is like a great way to just introduce that. Anyone can do it. You're just, like I said, building that box around.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's really how I discovered the breathing is, I got down on a rabbit hole with training and everything, but when I realized the impact that it can have on decreasing anxiety and, using it as a form of meditation, I thought, okay, great, even better.
Yeah, I think I saw one time, if you go to like the hierarchy of needs, breathing's the one that has the shortest time frame that you can survive without doing it correctly.
Exactly.
Or not having it, right? So your breath is that important. If you take it away, you're dead in 3 to 5 minutes.
I like to tell people, a friend of mine came up with this thing called the rule of threes. We can go 3 decades without training. It's not recommended, but you'll still be alive.
Yeah.
You can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without sleep or water. Yeah. And only 3 minutes without breathing.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So when you're trying to structure your importance or where to spend some time.
Right. And you can take it one level further and say, we can't even go 3 seconds without thinking. So your mindset, which is so closely tied to breathing.
Yeah.
So
very cool. Yeah. Well, awesome, Brandon, man. I appreciate you being on the podcast. Any final words?
I would encourage anyone, whether it's an endurance, whether it's a run or any goal that you have set, a competition, powerlifting meet, whatever it may be, just create momentum. Going and doing one race or one competition, it's a great end goal, but you got to keep that momentum going. Be consistent on your journey and know your abilities and where you fall, and then you can adjust your pace and your plan accordingly. And if anyone's looking to do any races or especially on trail, I'm all for it.
Awesome, man. Well, great stuff. That was a great podcast, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to NBS Fitness Radio. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, follow us on social media, and check out our website at www.nbsfitness.net. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more NBS Fitness Radio.